Partner in politics for Hour One is someone you should know by now. He is the host and producer of The Conversation Live, also a contributor to the LA Progressive, a journalist, award-winning journalist, James Farr. Good morning.
Good morning, Dominique. How are you?
All is well. How you doing?
You know, I'm good. You know, I feel like I want to join PETA. You know, so I may be your first member in People for the Ethical Treatment of what was the acronym?
Oh, mine is People for the Ethical Treatment of People. Yeah.
People. There you go. I'm ready to join with you, but I'm doing great. Thank you so much.
You'll be my first member. So.
I want to be a charter member, but thanks so much for again having me, and let's chop it up.
Yeah, I mean, again, one of the things we've been able to do this week, which I feel good about, is kind of shining the spotlight on areas that are actually Southern California or technically LA, but we just don't spend that much time on them because we tend to be focused on the city proper, you know, South LA, what we call Los Angeles. But really, we spent Monday talking about Long Beach, all the way from the IE, the Antelope Valley, all the way to Santa Monica. It's all Southern California. It's all part of the same community. And one of the things you've done really, really well is tracking what's going on in Pasadena, Altena, that area, which has, for whatever reason, been sort of a hotbed for police misconduct.
It seems to be, but, you know, it is consistent here as it is in many other cities across, you know, this county and this nation. So it's something that, you know, local community members have had to deal with for decades. And, you know, I listened to the promo on just before we came on, you know, the question about ending police violence and brutality. And, you know, it's rhetorical, you know, in the sense that, yes, we want to end it, right? But you just see so many different ways that this culture of police excessive use of force, police being heavy-handed, you know, violating constitutional rights, you know, even being found by a federal judge in a ruling to be their activities to be unlawful. So it's a lot that's happening up here.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because when you go, if you're from, you know, South LA and you go, it's such a quaint, Pasadena's such a quaint little spot, you know, all the cute little shops and restaurants. But for me, certain episodes like Kendrick McDade always haunt me just because of the way, you know, we talk about how the bigger agencies, if they have a problem police officer or an officer who gets in trouble, oftentimes they will end up going to a smaller outlying department like a Pasadena and continue their antics.
Well, you know, that's exactly what we saw in this Christopher Ballew case. And I have an article that published, I believe today, that kind of sums up his $3.2 million settlement agreement that he reached with the city to resolve or dismiss a lawsuit from a 2017 very, very savage beating. One of the things that we learned about one of the officers, Officer Larry Esparza, if any of your listeners, Dominique, watched Colin Kaepernick's Killing County, which is a docuseries he produced with ABC News, it documents Bakersfield in Kern County. And as you know, the ACLU, I believe it was in 2021, you know, did a very deep dive into the history of and the current situations that were going on within the Kern County Sheriff's Office, as well as the Bakersfield Police Department. We see, a reader of mine made me aware of it in the documentary, but we see Officer Esparza kind of matriculate through this culture of policing up in Bakersfield, right? And then we later learn that he is connected, if not implicated, in the death of an informant that he was handling illegally, as well as a suspect, and an officer was also shot. And so there's a lot of corruption there, but we see that migratory pattern that you're speaking about, where an officer leaves one department, comes to another, and in this case, the timeline lines up where we see Esparza leave Bakersfield, and within a year, he's beating Ballew.
So
still on probation. Go ahead.
That's crazy. I mean, it is crazy, but not. It's one of those things that's shocking but not surprising. So this guy, right, Larry Esparza, leaves Bakersfield. I mean, if we had the kind of thing we talked about in the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, where there was a national database of problem officers, although we know these folks know more than they say they do, probably a background check would do it. But why? What would have been the red flag for this guy Esparza that would have stopped him from getting hired from Bakersfield?
You see, back here in Pasadena. No, the chief at the time, Philip Sanchez, all chiefs approve all hires at the end of the day. This case that Esparza was involved in was a very public case. And so a simple Google search, let alone what we believe our hiring processes are for, lateral as well as new recruits, is very extensive. So it's hard to believe that the chief at that time was not aware of this. But we have to close the gap in that if an officer is laterally transferring or moving to another department, they basically quit and they close their books. Some departments will take them if they do show their books, and by that I mean their background. Others are kind of like a free-for-all, and so it's not as a database is good, but it has to be a little bit tighter.
Interesting. Talking with James Farr, and there's so many cases. Sometimes we don't track each one; they blend together. And when we come forward, I want to talk a little bit more about this case. Go back in time and talk about what happened to Christopher Ballew in 2017, why it's relevant now, and why this isn't just another case that we will quickly mix up with all the other cases, because so many Black people are being attacked, being killed, and being seriously injured by law enforcement agencies across the country. I'm Dominique DiPrima, talking with James Farr of The Conversation Live, and this is KBLA Talk 1580. Right now, I'm in conversation with the creator of The Conversation Live. Right now, it's on First Things First, KBLA Talk 1580. James Farr is an accomplished journalist. He is a film documentarian and a member of the National Association of Black Journalists. James Farr, some people hear me talking on the show and they think that I am anti-police, and it's not that. I just stop giving me so many things to talk about. I feel I'm not even an abolitionist, although I feel like we need to radically reimagine what law enforcement and policing looks like. I do believe in reprioritizing budgets to reflect the reality of what's needed by communities. That said, it's not that I'm on some anti-cop tirade, but I am anti-injustice. And it seems like, up there in the Pasadena, Altena area, we do see quite a bit of it. In what you call in your latest article, a pattern of police violating policy, racial targeting, and more. So talk about what happened to Christopher Ballew.
Share some of the same views, Dominique. And, it's not what I call it. It's what the data shows. It's what the records show, that there is a pattern of heavy-handed policing towards, and that's no surprise, right, towards African Americans and Latinos. But back in 2017, Chris was just driving his car. He had tinted windows and no front license plate, and these two officers, Larry Esparza and Zachary Lujan, were out hunting. They were patrolling in the area on an active fishing expedition looking for, air quote, gang members, right? They were part of a special unit. Chris had pulled into the gas station, had casually exited his car, and was heading into the mini mart when the officers swooped in, pulled up behind him, and immediately went hands on. From there, Dominique, it just goes bad, and it goes bad real quickly. Chris is struck with a baton at least 5 times so hard that it bent the baton. His face is slammed double-handedly into the asphalt. He's failed to be handcuffed. He's transported without medication. It's just a horrific experience for what otherwise was just a good young brother in the community going about his day, minding his business while being black. And this is the result. This brother was snatched off the street and now had to face a 5-year trafficking into the criminal, I guess, injustice system because he did nothing wrong.
I mean, I've seen the tape. It's pretty terrible. And I guess, this case it's weird to me because, as your article states, there was a huge settlement. I think it's pretty huge, $3.2 million, right?
Yeah, I mean, I can't say what's huge, but I get your point.
Go ahead. To me, for a person that's still alive, that's a sizable, maybe it's not huge. It's a sizable award, $3.2 million settlement. But yet the officers are ruled to be in policy. They were completely exonerated by the internal department review. That to me is confusing. We're going to pay you $2 million because we messed up, but yet this is totally fine and the officers can carry on with no accountability or no work consequences, right? They're not paying the $3.2 million. They actually, from what I understand, have great assignments and continue to thrive within the department.
Absolutely. And, with speaking with Chris and his attorney, Chris would have taken less of a settlement if the officers could have been held to actually have to pay themselves. This was not about money for him. But when you put that spotlight, on money within the last 18 months or so, almost 2 years, we've seen our city pay out over $10 million. One for the 7.5 for the death of Anthony McClain from the August 2020 homicide. And then this finally comes to resolution. But, the command staff all knew about what happened. When a critical incident happens, it triggers an automatic response in the department, and they all see the video. And so what's important to point out at that time is Esparza was still about 2 or 3 weeks away from sunsetting on his probation, which means when the chief at that time saw that video, regardless of that video, if he didn't like the way the officer shined his shoes that day, he was an at-will employee and could have fired him. Had he fired him, I think this would have been a different, certainly financial resolution. The community might have felt differently about the heinous acts, but it is a contemporary Rodney King moment right here in the same community that Rodney King lived and grew up in. And Chris is not, I guess he is lucky. The gas station is where the $1 billion mega lotto was won. So the fact that he is alive, I guess that is his fortune. But we got to look at the 5 years it took to get here and possibly the lasting effects on his life and what that does to a family.
Yeah, we got about a minute before news, traffic, and sports will continue on the other side, James Farr. But when you say, the 5 years, you're talking about from the moment he was pulled over and beaten up to the moment that he got the settlement.
Yes, and that only begins another chapter, right? But yes, those are the 5 years that we're speaking of, because from the very beginning and on video, as you heard him, he maintained his innocence. He maintained that he complied. But what we saw is that blacks are asked to be superhuman and be submissive under the threat of violence and certainly a physical assault on their body.
Yep. And in many cases, in many of these cases, conflicting commands or commands they're not able to comply with because they're handcuffed or being, beaten up or whatever the case may be. We're talking with James Farr, the LA Progressive, and you're welcome to join the conversation. 800-920-1580. I'm Dominique DiPrima for KBLA Talk 1580. Thank you. I do appreciate you and appreciate James Farr of the Los Angeles Progressive and LA Los Angeles Progressive and the Conversation Live. I was taking you to LA Live, James Farr. He's also co-founder of the Pasadena African American Film Foundation and the Black August Film Festival. James, one of the things that strikes me about the situation with Christopher Ballew, aside from the fact that he's so young when this happens, he's just 21, is that the cameras were rolling, body cams, security cams, and the officers knew it. So this idea that body cameras would stop police from, doing crazy things, at least in this case, doesn't seem to apply.
It certainly doesn't seem to apply, and it wouldn't be an overreaching statement to say that it really doesn't matter, because as officers can articulate, and as we saw, I watched all of the footage, right?
Wow.
Not just what the final clips are. I'm talking about almost 100 hours of viewing of this footage to put together the documentaries. And so I have a pretty working knowledge of how the sequence of events played out. And what we see is the officers lying about what happened from the beginning. And so it didn't matter that the cameras were on. What we saw them was audibling and physically acting out certain things so that what was captured seems to help shape and create a narrative. But one of the first things Esparza says to, backup officers is that we were chucks up, meaning it was a fight. You saw the video, Dominique. Was there a fight?
No, I didn't see a fight. Yep.
We see someone deflecting an assault. And so, I don't know. They say the cameras are supposed to be a deterrent. That's what we bought into here in the city of Pasadena. I'm switching hats as a resident, but in this case, part of the problem is the policy has not been amended that officers shall activate their cameras. It currently states that they should. And so if you know that there's no real consequence, and in the case of these officers, who come from one, the LA Sheriff's Department, the other from Bakersfield, you see a pattern of behavior that, it is unfair to the good men and women, right? Let me be balanced, that work in the police department. But, this is they talk about bad apples. I think these guys came from toxic soil. So,
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, and the bad apples thing always makes me cringe, because it's a way of just blaming the individuals rather than the system that they work in that allows them to do that. If it was just bad apples, they'd be reported by good apples, and they would be, kicked out of the orchard by a system that supported, justice.
Actually, Dominique, I mean, it was reported, right? I mean,
right.
You saw it. I saw it. We all saw it, right? The world saw it at almost, as soon as it happened. And so what the public is told from the department is incongruent with what actually happens internally. And so from the very beginning, I could have told you these officers were going to be cleared, right? That's just what it is. And once they've been cleared, they can no longer face prosecution from the standpoint of an internal discipline or some other type of review. The DA decided not to charge it. I don't know if the DA could pick it back up with a second lens. I mean, because there is some actual threats of bodily harm that the federal judge ruled that Chris's behavior was innocuous. He wasn't doing anything, and it did not warrant the level of aggression. And then we see the process after where it just stayed quiet.
Right, and you note in your article that according to the judge, according to Pasadena Now, judge ruled that that racism and race was a viable argument, that it was a viable basis for a lawsuit to go forward, considering the traffic stops by the gang unit there in Pasadena, which at least 44% of those folks stopped are black. I don't know what the numbers are as far as the residents of Pasadena, but I'm quite sure it ain't 44%.
Not even close. It's not even close. And so, again, there are pretextual reasons for stopping Christopher. You don't see officers stopping white women. You don't see officers stopping other motorists in other parts of the city, right? So this is something that they choose to enforce when they choose to enforce it, and it's not equally enforced across all of Pasadena. And so, again, this is a culture. It's a culture.
So, of course, why the settlement now? This is the 12th of April. The trial is set for when?
The trial was set for later this month.
Right. So they drag their feet and set up roadblocks to justice for 5 years, and then suddenly, when the trial is weeks away, a settlement emerges.
And that's the disappointing part, right? As for both Christopher, for his family, and for our greater community at large, right? We all saw what happened. What's the wait, right? Why the process? And I have on record the former Chief Sanchez, former Chief Perez, all guaranteeing that this investigation and the process, again, we're going back 5 years, would be wrapped up in 6 to 8 months. Again, this is standard speak from chiefs about an investigation, right? It's 5 years.
Right, and why they don't want to release footage, and they never want to release names. And, we have to wait for the investigation in about 6 to 8 months, and now it's 5 years later.
6 to 8 months, and then it's 5 years later.
Yeah.
But why now, Dominique? They don't want this case in front of a jury.
Yeah.
Bottom line, and I don't think that it would have fared well. So when you again isolating back onto what the settlement was, that's through mediation. So that was not the highest number, nor was it the lowest number. So It could have potentially been far greater. It also could have gone to trial, and a jury could have came back and awarded a lot less. What we see from the city's or more, correct, right? And so what we see here is the city using a tactic that ultimately further victimizes Ballew. It vicariously traumatizes the community, but they did not want to take the chance of getting in front of a jury and putting these officers on the stand and potentially having an even larger settlement.
Do you think that a case like the case of Charles Towns, having been in the spotlight again, especially with the Pasadena police and Altena sheriff harassing that man's children in front of their home and hemming them up and letting them go? I mean, does all this kind of publicity, do you think it impacts the decision of the department of the city to go ahead and, because $3.2 million, I mean, I don't know the Pasadena annual budget, but it ain't no LA city annual budget. $3.2 million is a chunk of change.
Well, Dominique, there's something called insurance, and there's something called a premium. And so it would be different if these settlements, right, when we talk about defunding police or reallocating, but let's say if the settlements were, as they are in just these two instances, about $10 million. If that money was coming out of the police annual budget, I think police would have a different argument. And so the taxpayers, right? These officers don't live in this city. They don't live in this community. They're not as vested in this community, and many of them are just occupying this community. And so it is an insurance policy that is paying this. Right. I'm still waiting on documents to find out exactly how much in legal fees did this cost the city. It's not just the 3.2.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's actual hard
even
dollars.
if those officers were on the line for 5%, right, of what they cost the city or the insurance policy, I bet you they would have a different attitude about who they decide to attack on any given day. I'm talking with James Farr of the LA Progressive. When we come forward, I want to talk about some other local issues here in greater Los Angeles, but also for Christopher Ballew and his family. Does this constitute justice, the settlement? What else, if anything, are they looking for? This is KBLA Talk 1580. We're unapologetically progressive. And neither do you. You're welcome into the conversation, 800-920-1580. Talking with James Farr from the LA Progressive. You can find them at laprogressive.com, by the way. So, to me, what else would the city do besides settle the judge's words basically saying that what the officers did here against Christopher Ballew was unconstitutional, and that they violated a person's Fourth Amendment right to be free of excessive force. No warning was given, and less intrusive forms of force are available. He says their case law is sufficient to put a prudent officer on notice that baton strikes, punches, and other such uses of force against a person who is suspected of minor, non-jailable infractions poses little or no risk to others or police officers and offers minimal or no resistance, violates that person's Fourth Amendment right. I mean, to me, that's like the judge kind of telling you, and y'all about to lose.
I think the judge put the city on notice in the strongest possible way, right? But again, the city is seasoned in this process, right? And so this is a pattern that they play out post events, right? It takes time. But again, these things further victimize the community. You asked about, Chris, and is this justice? I don't want to answer that for him. I will answer that in one of the future articles that's coming out in the next couple of weeks. But what I can tell you is he did want the officers to be held accountable. Now, there comes a point in a legal proceeding where there has to be a decision that's made, right? Is it prudent to press forward with a trial, or is this option the best pathway, right? But, in speaking with him and certainly his mother, she is proud of Christopher for him standing up for himself, for him doing a lot of the legal research and helping his attorney be as knowledgeable, as informed as he could be. And so, is it justice? I don't know, Dominique. It's Chris should have never been in this situation.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, clearly it's just a piece of justice, but I just, I always want to know what the families want, because so many times they end up focusing on the bigger picture. They end up trying to get justice for everybody, and not, many times it's not, of course it's about the money, but it's not about the money. It's about, like you said, accountability and the firing of, to me, those officers should not be walking around with guns. They just shouldn't be. I just don't see how you can really justify that.
Dominique, Chris was your son. Chris was my son. You're just a good kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
And from a basic black family,
I mean, to me, even if he was the biggest gang member in the world, though, he doesn't deserve to just be beaten up by people that are supposed to protect and serve. I do know, clearly he's educated, clearly he's, an incredible young man. But to me, we shouldn't have to be perfect to qualify for normal treatment by law enforcement, or what should be normal treatment.
2,000 words I wrote, 5 of them bother me still, and that is Chris was not a gang member. And I put that in there because the audience isn't always as in touch with the culture, right? And so
yeah, no, you got to say it, but I hate saying it because I'm like, and even if he was, the cops don't get to kill and beat him because he's still a human being if he is a gang member. And also, what is your definition of gang member? Because a lot of times they just think because people are from certain communities, they can automatically paint them that way. That you wearing a color, what is the behavior? Is it criminal or is it just your existence that's a problem? Those are always the questions that I think we as progressives need to be asking. Otherwise, we go down that slippery slope of dehumanizing and criminalizing ourselves. Talking to James Farr, and we'll continue the conversation. And it is live when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580. So we ran through all of our time today. I'm going to have to give you a speed round here, James Farr. There's some kind of there's a controversy about a mural at an Altena coffee shop. Give me your feedback. Apparently, the unincorporated coffee roasters in Altena has got the neighborhood up in arms because of a painting.
A little bit more than up in arms. Friday, I got a call from a community member who has been consumed and almost in tears by what this particular community member is seeing depicted in this mural. Let me say this. I am an avid supporter of free speech, right? And so this isn't an assault on the artist. This is his artwork. But I think the good neighbor part of the folks who are the owners of the coffee shop, they've heard enough from the community. Just take it down. It's really that simple. But you have newer community members who aren't as familiar with what the area was and is becoming. And so basically the white folks, some of the same ones who were out there marching in 2020, don't see a problem with it. That's what's happening.
And people say that it's violent. LA City Council reappointed Heather Hutt to represent the 10th District. I know that's not Pasadena, but it's big news around here. Some folks felt that, including Monica Rodriguez, the lone no vote, that we should have had a special election.
It would have been a waste of money and nothing more than a distraction. Let Council Member Hutt continue to assume the duties in the 10th District and represent her constituents. And then when the seat comes up for election, if she chooses to run, she and the others can all put their hat in, and then the people will have their say at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a resident of the 10th District, and I definitely second what you just said. James Farr, time flies when you're talking about important stuff. Please tell us how to track you.
At James Farr Live, you can read my articles over at the LA Progressive and many of the other conversations you and I have had, Dominique.
Yes, indeed. And by the way, I just found out there's pictures of you in this exhibit, which is being held at the Red Hen Press, which is about Black Lives Matter, its impact on Pasadena, Altena. It's at the Red Hen, which is 1540 Lincoln Avenue in Pasadena, Monday through Thursday from 9 to 5:30, now through June. So you can go see.
That's news to me.
You can go see pictures of Mr. Farr. And,